Kia ora, and welcome. Haere mai. Big it up to yourself. This is the Niche Cast, and we are here to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence. Don't know how much excellence we have lined up for today's show, but we have Aotearoa sporting matters at a head right now. We are here to talk through Blackcaps versus Pakistan. We'll chat a bit about the Plunket Shield as well. We'll get into the football Ferns playing against Canada. Much improved second performance, which, relatively speaking, bit of excellence within that. And then we'll finish with some Dan Hooker, UFC Kōrero. Dan Hooker fights Islam Makhachev in the UAE. We've also got the Blackcaps in the UAE. So all the Kiwis are in the UAE. As we said last time, it's a Kiwi-UAE party. And that fight is ridiculous, massive, and plenty of intriguing stuff happening there. Shout out to all our Patreons, the Patreon whānau, who support us straight up the guts. The best way to support the Niche Cache and the Niche Cast is on Patreon. So if you do like what we're doing, you enjoy the content, you enjoy the kōrero and the, not sure for the Māori word of writing, typing, blogging, but if you like that stuff as well, Patreon is the place to support us straight up the guts. You can go to patreon.com/elnichecache, elnichecache, and you get a good karma boost. You get extra podcast every week, and it's just a massive help to us as well. So it's just good vibes all around, and we welcome all our Patreon whānau to this episode as well, and any future Patreon whānau members as well. Every Monday and Friday, we deliver the Niche Cache in an email format via Substack. Sign up to nichecache.substack.com, whack in your email address, and you'll get Niche Cache content straight into your emails Monday and Friday evenings. That's just if you're a bit off like social media, don't really want to be all up in that, and you want extra yarns, topical yarns, stuff that is happening on a Monday and Friday, sign up to the email and you'll get the goodness straight there. And as always, we're always writing about Kiwi sports at the niche-cache.com. There's a fresh Stephen Adams yarn up there. There's a fresh Blackcaps yarn up there. There's fresh Plunket Shield yarns up there. There's football Ferns recaps up there. There is all the good shit that you love about Kiwi sports at the niche-cache.com. We always start our podcasts with a bit of mindfulness to inspire and to ponder. Wildcard up in the naughty north of Aotearoa, can you please deliver some mindfulness to us?
That I can, and this is definitely one with the emphasis on the pondering here. This is old mate Baba Ram Das. Regular occurrence in these mindfulness things is Mr. Ram Das's words. Here we go. He says, "We're fascinated by the words, but where we meet is in the silence between them."
It's a stink face mindfulness. That one is like when someone, when you got a rap and you're just like, oh, that was hard, or just like a dunk, or like a Sarpreet Singh waxing the his opponent the other day. Nice maneuver there. It's like, oh, stink face. You just hit me with the stink face mindfulness, which is beautiful. Well, how do you? What's the importance of silence there? What do you find? Because like it's I was about to waffle on about connection, but then I was thinking silence doesn't come to mind when I'm thinking connection. So how do you interpret that silence a little bit there?
Well, I mean, it's that's what I mean about it being a ponderer, a stink face ponderer. It's a maybe a little bit open-ended as a quote, but I'm sure it's probably from one of his books or something where it's explained in more detail. I'd have to peek at that, but like there's a couple things that spring to mind from that, whether it's what he intended from that quote, or not, I don't know. But like the idea of the because it's not just silence; it's the silence between the words, and sort of like it sounds like the term like reading between the lines. You know what I mean? And I sort of picture that quote as being like think of like two people separated by like a river or something, and cannot make that connection. Like that's just a metaphor for not being connected. And then the words are sort of like the intrigue, but then the silence between them is the bridge. I don't know if that I can take that further, but it also reminds me of something that there's a TV show called Rectify that was on like sort of probably finished about 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. It was a American thing about this dude who gets out of prison after like 18 years for a crime we don't know if he committed or not. And it's not really about the crime. It's about him like readjusting to life when he spent 18 years behind bars on like death row, solitary confinement, just reading books and whatever. And he's a bit weird because of this and yada, yada, yada. But there's a line that the main dude has in there where he says something like, I can't remember the context. I just remember he was talking to someone. They asked him something about God, and he said something along the lines of, "You find God in between the seconds, like God lives in between the seconds," which I don't know if that's meant to be like time out of time kind of thing, or if it's I don't know, it's something like different realms or whatever. Like you can probably take that a few different ways in the same. But that also reminded me of like the silence between the words and then like the in between the seconds kind of. Both of those were kind of evocative in the same way.
One would imagine that in the silence is where you come closer to your intuition. And when you come closer to your true being within yourself, not your ego, not the frantic energy, I need to worry about this, the anxiety, whatever. The silence is where you find your intuition. It's where you find your soul speaking to you. And that might be God. And that's that's how you get into it.
I mean, when you think about it, like language isn't the thing itself, right? Like the phone, like a phone, the word phone isn't this thing is just an object somehow. Phone is a connection of letters that we use to describe it, if that makes any sense at all. But the language isn't the thing itself. The language is just what describes the thing itself, right? So I wonder if there's something to do with that, like between the words is not just the language, which is a sort of secondary thing, but the primary, whatever the thing is at the core, is what comes between the words. I don't know. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. You sort of sparked something in me there.
Well, it's the gray area. You can't explain it.
Yeah.
So there's no words to label it. So maybe it's more powerful because you can't label it with words. You can't, describe it or anything. But it's
the origin of the stink face.
There you go. Here we go. Was there a moment in that Blackcaps game against Pakistan, first game of the T20 World Cup, that created a stink face for yourself? Like something from the Blackcaps where you're like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, that's good, yeah.
Every time they took a wicket in the second innings, I think. There weren't a heap of those moments in the first innings. I think their innings was definitely a grind, and I've got probably talk about the batting order a little bit in a sec because there were definitely some curiosities there. But I think they did all right to get through to the kind of total that they could defend if they bowled really well. But they didn't go beyond that. Like they were probably a good 20 runs short. However, like take some early wickets, as we've been saying, and they did like throughout the second innings. You can say Pakistan were pacing themselves, knowing they didn't need to score 160, 170, that 135, I think it was, to win. That was something they could do by just making sure they don't lose the game in the first 6 to 10 overs. But I mean, even still, like the Blackcaps was steadily ahead, just slightly ahead through most of that chase. And I think with about 5 overs to go, it was starting to feel like maybe they were actually favorites to win this thing now. And then I think the Pakistani stink faces came along because who was it? Shot Malik and and these guys just started bashing sixes all of a sudden. And there was the stat that we tweeted out afterwards of just the last 4 overs of the game, and I think New Zealand scored off the top of my head, but I think it was 27 for 4 off the last 4 overs, and Pakistan's were 37 without loss with 8 so there was 16 deliveries. So yeah, eight balls still to go. 37 without loss from their last. Like they just, in an otherwise really close, really tight contest, where runs were difficult to come by, wickets weren't tumbling like one after the other in a big flurry, but they were falling relatively regularly. We weren't seeing big partnerships or anything like that. Every sort of 20 to 30 balls, there was another wicket. It just, it was such small differences throughout the game, but then in those death overs, Pakistan were just miles better, and that's how they won the game.
How did you view the makeup of the team? Because I'll ask you that, but then I'll just explain, because I wrote this morning about the absence of Lockie Ferguson. So specifically with Lockie Ferguson, he's always injured. As unfortunate as it is, he's always injured. We talked about this during the IPL. He missed a couple of games with a hamstring injury. And I just Googled some injury related, Lockie Ferguson hamstring, Lockie Ferguson calf. He missed months last summer with a stress fracture or a partial stress fracture in his back. He missed games in the World Cup, maybe one game or multiple games in the World Cup with a hamstring or calf injury as well. This dude is excellent when he's playing. He's literally one of the most, we've talked about how you've got Saudi Bolt, Sodhi Santner as all-time leading wicket takers for New Zealand in T20 international cricket. Ferguson's efficiency, his average, his strike rate, it's all far superior. And then in the IPL, he was fantastic as well. His T20 Blast, he was fantastic there as well. He is literally, well, not literally, I believe he is the most efficient T20 international bowler for Aotearoa.
I'd go even further and say white ball bowler.
Yeah, white ball
I think
bowler.
he's done very similar things in ODIs.
But as we always say, the best ability is availability. And it was, yes, this game was really close. This game was competitive, but it also threw up some familiar Blackcaps vibes. It was already a bit complex just with the Pakistan situation where, New Zealand's hated by Pakistan right now. Not by the players. The players, what the Pakistan team is doing. I think a lot of Kiwis are Pakistan's my team. But then you got Pakistan hating Kiwis. So it's a bit of a weird dynamic, because just watching Babar Azam, watching Shaheen Shah Afridi, even that Asif Ali character, these dudes, Shadab Khan, all these dudes are really fun cricketers. And I just like the Pakistani vibe and a bit of the avant-garde twist, because they're not allowed in the IPL and all that stuff. Shout out to Pakistan, but unfortunately Pakistan hates us right now. That was already tricky. They're playing in Sharjah, which was full of Pakistanis, with a sprinkling of Kiwis and a sprinkling of random UAE folk. It was a Pakistan home game. And then we have Lockie Ferguson being ruled out through injury. And then also we have a bit of a messy team selection. And I found this really curious. I actually found the stuff around Ferguson really interesting as well. Gary Stead said that Ferguson was ruled out and they wanted to bring Adam Milne into the team for that game. And I'm not here saying Kyle Jamieson should be selected to play. We're just reading what the Blackcaps are telling us through their own selections. Kyle Jamieson bowled in both the warm-up games. So how does it work when you got Kyle Jamieson in the squad, bowling in the warm-up games, where he conceded 10 runs and over at least, and he has conceded over 10 runs and over for most of his T20 cricket this year. He's bowling in the warm-up games. Ferguson gets injured, and they have this desperation to get Adam Milne into the game. And I imagine because they couldn't get Adam Milne into the game, that's when we have this other situation where Jimmy Neesham is the savior. Suddenly Jimmy Neesham's a frontline bowler. Suddenly Jimmy Neesham's batting number 4. He was pretty good as well. He only conceded 6 runs and over, and he had an over left, So I imagine he would have bowled the final over, and it could have been like a massive moment for Jimmy Neesham. I'm just curious about all those little factors relating together. Like, it was all very strange. And then it comes into, well, Jimmy Neesham's really good, and I'm excited, and I like Jimmy Neesham as a end of innings slugger and a dude bowling an over, a sixth bowling option. Suddenly, Jimmy Neesham is the fifth bowling option, and he's batting number 4. Kane Williamson literally said it was really difficult to start on this pitch. It was a tricky pitch to bat on. It was not easy. So we're chucking Jimmy Neesham up to bat 4. Like, you've got Devon Conway, you've got Glenn Phillips, you've got 2 of the best T20 batsmen from Aotearoa right now. Surely you want to get them in as early as possible, give them time to adapt and face these conditions. And instead you put Jimmy Neesham up number 4, and he gets out second ball. So then Devon Conway and Glenn Phillips are already in the game. And we had Daryl Mitchell opening. I'm not too fussed about that. I thought Daryl Mitchell was really good. I really liked what Daryl Mitchell did, and I believe he is a first 11 T20 player. Through Daryl Mitchell's T20 tournament stuff and what he's done in T20 international cricket in his T20 career, he basically averages just below 30 with a strike rate of 130. And in this game, he scored 27 runs at a strike rate of 135. That's kind of what you can just guarantee with Daryl Mitchell, I reckon. He's really good playing straight. He attacks. He's crafty enough to deal with conditions, and he can just cruise at 130 strike rate. But he's opening, and he hasn't opened before. There was kind of Ross Taylor alluded to this in the T20 wrap on the Sky Sports program, that he hasn't been prepared for this job necessarily. The warm-up games, Daryl Mitchell opened one game, Tim Seifert opened the other game, and Tim Seifert is now in a finishing role, even though he struggles to bat with a strike rate over 120. So he is the dude tasked with smashing sixes at the end, but his Caribbean Premier League, his Super Smash, his T20 series against Australia was all fairly mediocre as far as Tim Seifert smashing it around goes. And if you're batting Jimmy Neesham up number 4, Tim Seifert's the only finisher. You can say Glenn Phillips is a finisher. Devon Conway, they're batting down the order to finish, but we've seen how difficult it is for these dudes to come in later on in the innings and start hitting from ball 1. So all of it's the basic premise of get your best batsman batting as early as possible, give them time, and allow them to build in. It was just all very strange. It wasn't like this is the best T20 team available, factoring in Lockie Ferguson's absence. It was as close as the game was, and as competitive as the game was, and as competitive as the Blackcaps were, despite the conditions, despite it being a home game for Pakistan, I still felt like the Blackcaps restricted how good they could be, with their selections, with the way this team was operated. And it's then we get into the Kane Williamson versus Gary Steadcutt stuff, because I'm none of this is Kane Williamson's fault. He's the man. But Kane Williamson might have said Jimmy Neesham bat 4. Kane Williamson might be desperate for Tim Seifert to play as the wicketkeeper. So that's a bit weird as well. Whereas some of the other stuff just feels quintessential weird Gary Stead stuff, like the desperation to bring Adam Milne into the team when Kyle Jamieson was selected ahead of Adam Milne. So why are you so desperate to bring in Adam Milne ahead of Kyle Jamieson? It's all very strange. And I'm curious how you process those selection matters, and especially the way the batting lineup was delivered, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's a different angle I'd take on the batting versus the bowling lineup. I'll do the bowling lineup first because that's where you started with. I think what that says, the the fact that I mean, well, first of all, like no two ways about it. Lockie Ferguson being out for the tournament is a massive blow for the Blackcaps. Like he was their X factor bowler, and now they don't have him. And I think we saw a stark difference in what their bowling lineup looks like, where versus without him versus what it could have been like with him. Because and it was before they even bowled a ball. It was looking at the team and being like, well, they need 4 overs out of Neesham plus Mitchell plus probably maybe a little bit of Phillips as well might have been an option. They need 4 overs out of those guys. Versus them being the guys you can bring on as someone else's, and like Trent Bolt gets smacked or Tim Southee gets smacked early on or something. We'll sneak a Jimmy Neesham in over because he takes wickets when he gets smacked sometimes. If the batsmen are on being more aggressive, that tends to be when he catches a cheeky pull shot skied up in the air or something like that, So just not having Ferguson, big blow in and of itself. And I think that was the Blackcaps were, I don't know. I mean, they were very good at restricting Pakistan and keeping for 15 overs anyway, until the guys just started swinging, and then the game changed and it just got absolutely ripped away from them all of it. And 15 overs of really hard grafting work was just ripped away from them in about 10 deliveries or something like that, just with a flurry of sixes and boundaries. And but that's the difference between a team who you have to play to the fine margins if your best bet is just to restrict them. And they did do well at picking up regular-ish wickets and keeping Pakistan in a difficult scenario. It's just you had Lockie Ferguson and maybe they were 8 down at that point and it was a different story. You got tail enders trying to slog it away for the last 10, 15 runs or whatever. So that's a massive blow. The fact that they tried to bring Milne in directly for him is, I think, says 2 things. I think it says, A, that Milne should have been in the squad to begin with. He shouldn't have been the injury replacement. He should have just been there regardless. And then B, I think it also says that the Blackcaps is, how they like the like-for-like replacement style thing. I reckon that tells you, therefore, that Kyle Jamieson is not competing for a spot with Lockie Ferguson or Adam Milne, that he's competing for a spot with Tim Southee or Trent Bolt, in which case, neither of them are injured, so Kyle Jamieson stays on the... he might end up playing because, Adam Milne has an injury history himself. He's not far off what Ferguson... In fact, he's probably had more injuries than Ferguson. And I'm thinking back to the 2015 World Cup, the one at home where I'm pretty sure Adam Milne started in the squad, got injured. I think Mitchell McClenaghan comes in, gets injured, and then Matt Henry ends up playing the semi in the final and bowling quite well in it too. As well as anyone bowled in the final. But they went through 3 players in that sort of third strike bowler kind of seamer position. Then this might end up being something similar here. So that's a bummer. But having said that, supposedly every team has a 16th man or whatever, because of the obvious reasons of it's really hard to bring people in through quarantines and stuff at the moment. So everyone's injury reserve was just already with the squad. In which case, if someone gets injured, why can you not just replace them immediately? I've got sympathy with Gary Stead for what he said there. I don't understand why the ICC can't just ratify that at the click of a mouse or something. I would have thought, because it's as simple as, if you replace someone, they can't come back into the squad. So that's it for Lockie Ferguson for the rest of the tournament. Obviously is anyway, because he's injured, but just to say that you can't, to keep the checks in place, that you can't just sort of milk that by pretending you've got a 16-man squad. It's if you replace someone with the injury guy, that guy can't come back, done. That's the only time you get to play that card. So I don't understand why it's such a thing where you have to suddenly wait several hours before he gets cleared. I thought that was a little bit strange, and I don't entirely understand that. From an ICC perspective,
it is the ICC. It is what.
Well, the conspiracy theory out there is saying, well, they're playing Pakistan, and Pakistan's a big market, and they're a little bit upset right now, and let's maybe toss them a bone and take an extra, a couple of hours to get the fax machine working or something like that. I just think there's there's enough evidence that the ICC aren't the most efficient organization to begin with before we have to start dipping into those kind of ideas, but into like sabotage ideas or anything. If he's still not available, I think he is now. I think they've done that by now. But if he still isn't available to play by the time we get to the India game, then I will definitely be entertaining conspiracies on that matter. What I think was especially...
Do you believe Adam Milne is that important? That he is the center of a conspiracy where Pakistan and India should be scared of Adam Milne, that the ICC is ruling Adam Milne out? Like, you're seriously throwing all this up as a factor?
Well, I'm not throwing it up as my opinion. I'm saying, I will say that if he still isn't available by the India game, because then at which point, like, what other evidence do we have to go by? Why is it taking so long? But I'm pretty sure he has been cleared by now, so I don't think that's an issue. I think he's a better bowler than Jimmy Neesham. I think that's safe to say. Jimmy Neesham's fine, but Adam Milne's very good. Like, he's especially good at keeping run rates down, and that would have been very, very helpful on a wicket like that, especially where we saw Pakistan's pace bowler, Haris Ralph, wasn't it, who bowled superbly, man of the match. Like, he was excellent, get bowling down at almost 150 clicks. Like, clearly the wicket had a little bit of pace in it, some from somewhere. And Adam Milne would clearly have been, he clearly would have improved that Blackcaps team. Although, having said that, maybe he wouldn't have, because from what Gary Stead has said in the media, it sounds like it was like, kind of shockingly, it was East Sodhi they were considering not playing had Milne been available. I assumed Mitchell came in and they shuffled the batting lineup around, which didn't make sense to begin with. But apparently not, in which case I'll come back to the batting order, because you already highlighted a few ways in which that one is a bit strange. But like, they didn't think the wicket was going to be as good for the spinners, and previous results had suggested that seam bowling, especially seam bowling on like a good length, had been really effective. But I mean, I just don't think any 2020 team in 2021, well, it's 20s in that, but any T20 team in 2021 who has a leg spinner of a world-class variety available, you should never not pick that leg spinner. Like, leg spinners in 2020s are like the dominating force. They're the best out there. They're the most difficult to hit, and the guys who take the most wickets. Like, you need a leg spinner in your team if you have that option. So I thought that was astoundingly weird, especially because I think Sodhi ended up being the best performing bowler in that innings. He took 2 wickets, and I think just in general he bowled really well and was difficult to get away. The one time I think it was might have been Mohammad Hafiz smacked him down the ground for a 6. He got him out a couple balls later, so you immediately got his revenge. Like, that was weird. That was strange. And it does. Well, I do think that was a specific to Sharjah scenario. I don't think that's something we'd see in the next couple of games when they're at Abu Dhabi. I think I'm not 100% on that, but something like that. As for the batting order, I think the Jimmy Neesham thing, and I'm like you, I don't mind Daryl Mitchell opening. I actually think he's a better option than Tim Seifert there. I think the weirdness is in there wasn't a lot of clarity beforehand, because he has not been an opener for Indy or Canterbury. I think this was the first time he'd ever opened it in a proper T20 game. Simon Dawes says something like that on the commentary. I haven't seen that ratified, but I'll trust his word for it. The weirdness is that he did open, as you say, in one of the warm-up games. I think just it's strange that wasn't like that. That's the thing they decided to do come the tournament. And of course, if they'd had the games against Pakistan, 5 extra T20s for preparation, these things would have been a bit clearer. So maybe we do have to cut them a little bit of slack for the fact that their preparation didn't happen with their top string team. So we didn't get to see how these combinations were being planned behind the scenes. But yeah, I think Daryl Mitchell batted really well in that opening spot in difficult scenario. I think he's got an all right combination there with Martin Gubb, so I don't mind that at all. The Jimmy Neesham thing, I think, was clearly a mistake, sliding him up to 4. I think it obviously didn't work, and I think in hindsight, it's not something they would have done again in that scenario necessarily. But I don't think it was like a permanent move or anything. I think it was just a matter of the spinners were on, they were struggling to keep up with the run rate that they wanted. They dipped under a run-up ball at that point. And it was just a matter of let's chuck a pinch hitter up. We normally want this guy pinch hitting at the end of the innings as the closer. Well, what if we can sneak like 30 off 20 or even just 20 off 10 or something right now? Just get us back above that sort of six RPO and threaten the spinners a little bit. Jimmy Neesham's maybe not the best guy to chuck in against the spinners. I think he probably prefers a bit of pace on the ball. He's very good timer, like very good eye. Maybe the turn isn't his best. He's not the worst in the team by any means in that scenario. And I think maybe the other reason he went up is because he's a left-hander, and they had at that point, I think Ahmad had bowled an over, and Shadab had just bowled. So Ahmad left arm tweaker, slow left arm, and then I think Shadab, the leg spinner, had bowled the previous over. So left arm tweakers don't spin the ball a mile. Neesham will be fine with that. Leg spinner, that's good for Neesham as long as he's spinning it into him. He can hit with the spin there. Unfortunately, what they did is as soon as Neesham came in, they just brought on the off spinner Hafiz, and he got him out the first ball he bowled to him, trying to hit against the spin in a way where, like, if you cross bat hit against the spin, that's all good because your cross bat gives you more of a surface area to hit, and actually, like the ball, if it's it's hard to explain, but you kind of intercepted it a way where you hit it a bit flusher if you're hitting against the spin. But that's not what he did. He didn't like drop on a knee and hit a big slog sweep. He just did the Jimmy Neesham flick of the wrist into the mid wicket and lifted it straight to a fielder. So I think if they had that choice again, they would not make that. Like, I think they would probably admit that that's an error, maybe not in public, but in private, I think they'd probably accept that. But I at least see the point of that. I think he was a pinch hitter to try raise the run rate, basically.
Everything you're talking about is like way too complex. It just smacks of overthinking everything. So,
well, I think it does, yeah.
And that I just don't. This is where I'm a bit scared, because these are the things we have come to know about the Blackcaps. The non-Kane Williamson regime. Like, I'm still loving Kane Williamson, so I can't, like, it's like, is this overthinking from Kane Williamson, or is it from other people? Because if it's from Kane Williamson, I'm gonna be hurt. It's like a fucking, shot through my heart. I just can't deal with it. But the whole thing just smells of overthinking. Like, everything you're saying about the bowling, way too complicated.
Yeah,
like, you've got your good bowlers, give them a go. Even
just pick your best players. Yeah.
Even the what you're saying about like for like, Adam Milne for Lockie Ferguson. Like, you selected Kyle Jamieson. Like, if you're thinking that way, like, well, first of all, why do you think Kyle Jamieson is like for like with Trent Boult and Tim Southee? That's a bit strange. But if you view the bowlers this way, and you've got, because Adam Milne's just as injury prone as Lockie Ferguson, as you said, like, just select both of them. And, like, I don't know, the whole thing just felt really complicated, and it was with bat and ball. Like, it wasn't just like these were isolated. It wasn't just like there was this little kerfuffle around Adam Milne and Lockie Ferguson. It was like the game started with that, the Ferguson injury, trying to get Milne in. And then we had the batting performance, and that was way too, like, through every little nook and cranny of the Blackcaps batting and bowling, because their fielding's always good, like all that Kiwi cricket stuff that we love. It was all
that
there.
Devon Conway catch,
like saving runs in the field, making it like they just made it a competitive game as a fielding unit, which, like, we love to see from Aotearoa teams. But batting and bowling, it was like, how can we make this the most complicated shit ever?
Right.
Like, even promoting Neesham to up the order, like, we need some runs. Well, even Conway is better at everything with the bat than Jimmy Neesham. Glenn Phillips is like a top 10 best funky T20 hitters in the world. So, like, just leave them. What are you doing? Why are you changing it? And then, like, even the side foot wicket keeping, we can still, like, this. I'm thinking, like, you just give Conway the wicket-keeping gloves, take out Seifert, then you can pick another bowler. You can pick Mark Chapman. Like, you can do so much more with this team as opposed to just having Seifert in there to do a role that he's clearly not informed to do. All of which,
especially with Mitchell opening, because it extends your middle order. Like, you still have Williamson and Conway in the middle overs. You don't actually like that actually makes it easier to do what you just said. You've still got Jimmy Neesham and Glenn Phillips at 5 and 6 as well. So like, where did Seifert bat here? Like 7 or 8 or something? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Faced 8 balls, 8 runs.
And he opened against England, I think it was, and he had the same thing. Yep. 8 runs off 8 balls, which is kind of nice. In the IPL, he played 1 game for KKR Kolkata under Brendan McCullum. Same exact role down the order, like batting 7 or 8. And it's like, in that role, it feels like you're carrying Seifert. As opposed to playing Seifert as a weapon, like weaponizing Seifert as they tried to do with Jimmy Neesham, maybe. It feels like, okay, we've got Seifert, he's the wicketkeeper, where can we hide him? Like, I think Ish Sodhi's a perfectly fine fielder in international cricket. Like, he stops the ball, takes his catches, tries hard in the field. But like, you rank it on like who's your worst fielder in a Blackcaps team. So there is no worst fielder. It's like they're all fucking good fielders, but you put someone like Ish Sodhi in that fine leg spot. That's what it felt like with Tim Seifert. It's like, how can we carry Tim Seifert but not, expose him too much? Well, we'll chuck him down the order. Well, it just seems really inefficient to hark back to that. So they play India on Monday, and everything could be very different because it is a different pitch. It's Dubai. We will surely we'll see a slightly different team, whether it's based off the pitch, whether it's based off those first game performances. Are there any, what are you looking to change for that game against India? Where Dubai, I think off the top of my head, because we did talk about this in the Patreon podcast earlier this week, I think the Dubai stuff is a bit more spin friendly. So you might see Todd Estel come in, you might see Mark Chapman come in, as we just discussed there, with batting and spin bowling. Also, though, we've got this batting lineup that has to score runs against spin bowling, because it's a bit of a tough start here where you've got Pakistan who were frothing to play the Blackcaps. Like, if their players weren't, their fans were, which only amplified the atmosphere and the buzz around that game. Well, Pakistan absolutely destroyed India, and India will be pretty keen to get back on the wagon with a dub against Aotearoa. And we'd both love for India to be shit and just have a nightmare tournament and struggle and lose against New Zealand and maybe lose against Afghanistan as well, whatever it is. That's not something I'm confident in happening. Instead, it feels like India are going to bounce back in a big way, and these are going to be two emotive games to start the campaign for the Blackcaps. So it's like, I'm thinking about a much improved Blackcaps performance, but I'm also expecting a far better Indian performance. And if India are hot, they can score 200 runs against this bowling attack. And if India are hot, they're going to be a trickier team with their bowling unit, even though their bowling unit isn't as good as their batting unit does. It looks like a pretty ho-hum Indian bowling attack. So I am curious, what do you think moving forward against India? What are you looking for? Any small changes, tweaks that you would make, and your feelings on the challenge posed by India?
Well, the idea about the Blackcaps overthinking things means that we could well see a few changes. I think if you're in that scenario where you are overthinking a few of these things that when the Black Caps are playing really well, a lot of these decisions just take care of themselves. Certainly in their test team, everything's nice and cozy for that reason, because guys perform and they don't have to worry. I think if this Black Caps team are getting, and 2020 offers more of that. It is the most like sort of analytical of the format, so there's a bit of that anyway. And the smaller margins means it's a little more important to try and like sort of game the system, so to speak. But I think if this Black Caps team are getting into that realm, it sort of says that they're either undercooked, and they definitely are, because they just haven't played enough 2020 games with their best players all available at once. So the combinations aren't quite there. They're figuring it out on the fly a little bit. I think it also says maybe they're not as confident as they would like to be, that they're trying to do some of these, like just trying to fiddle with things a bit. Having said that, I think India is more vulnerable maybe than you give them credit for there. I think if you look at this scenario, they're in the same position. Both teams lost to Pakistan. Both teams in their first game, both teams know that almost certainly, like unless Afghanistan start doing some crazy things, almost certainly one of these two teams will be going through to the semifinals, and it's going to be whoever wins this game. So it's basically a quarterfinal between the two. As long as they can each take care of business against the other teams, it's no, Afghanistan have a couple of superb spinners there, so that's no guarantee. But like, you'd still trust that to be the case, and which means that the pressure's on, and I think India as a nation, 1 billion people demanding that you win versus 5 million people demanding that you win. One of those is a lot more pressure than the other. You know what I mean? And I remember writing about this around the time of I think it was in an email, around the time of the World Test Championship. New Zealand has an amazing record at ICC tournaments against India. It's crazy. They almost always beat the World Test Championship as one example. Beat them in the last ODI World Cup semi-final. Beat them, bowling them out for 78, I believe, in the last Santner and Sodhi masterclass, I believe, in the last 2020 World Cup on their home soil as well. And it goes back further than that. I can't remember what the numbers are, but just when New Zealand has played India at ICC tournaments, we tend to do extremely well. And I didn't even realize that until I looked it up at that time. The reason I looked it up is because Indian fans seem to know all about it. They seem to be well aware that they always lose to New Zealand in big games like this, which, again, I guess probably plays into the idea of one of these teams is under a whole lot more pressure than the other team. And I think New Zealand is quite good at playing in that situation. So I do expect it'll be a little more of a spinning deck. Maybe that might be Glenn Phillips' opportunity to get an over or two in. Would be stunned I would have been stunned anyway if they hadn't picked the two spinners, as Gary Stead alluded that he might have, were Milne available. But Milne comes in for this next game, I'm pretty sure they'll still be picking Santner and Sodhi. Maybe that does mean Seifert has to drop out for this game. I don't know. You can get into, problem with Seifert is that we've seen that he can score runs quickly at other periods of his career. He's just in sheer form right now. So maybe the games against Afghanistan, Namibia, Scotland are a better opportunity for him to play himself into form. Definitely, if we lose to India, then there's nothing stopping us rotating around a little bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kane Williamson doesn't play all those games, given the bum elbow at the moment. Might not play them anyway, given considering you sort of back them to, certainly against Namibia, Scotland. Afghanistan's a tougher one, but I for all that we're saying about New Zealand being in a little bit of trouble because of the loss to Pakistan, as you mentioned, Pakistan lost by more. They lost by 10 wickets. Shane Shah Afridi's ripped up their top order. They're under more pressure. They're in a worse scenario. So I think if New Zealand can kind of hold the mirror up to India a little bit more and get them worrying about themselves, I think that kind of deflection of the pressure involved here, I think it definitely works in the Black Caps' favor.
Just to wrap up the Black Cap stuff, the thing about Seifert that I find strange is that he's been in I don't think it's a form thing, right? he has had really good moments, and then the next thing is a down moment. Or
well, he had one huge innings in the CPL, didn't he? Where he smacked like 44 off 20 or something in a big chase. Or
yeah, but it's longer. It's a longer tail because you go back to like last year's CPL, he was pretty mediocre, but also he didn't have to do much because his team was stacked. And then he was fantastic against West Indies and Pakistan in Aotearoa. But around those tournaments or around those series, he scored Super Smash runs. Like he was still top 10, I think, in Super Smash runs, but it wasn't Tim Seifert. It was 115 strike rate, Tim Seifert.
Yeah.
But that was a bit weird. And then he's really good against West Indies and Pakistan in Aotearoa, but then he's terrible against Australia. And he did score some runs in the CPL this year, but again, very slow strike rate. And I find it kind of fascinating because it's not necessarily form. It's something where it's like maybe it's good teams in certain conditions can nullify him or just something like that, which I think is fascinating to keep an eye on. But as you were explaining there, after one game, you yanked Tim Seifert out. That's also a bit strange. Although it's not necessarily new. One game would be new because against Australia, he opened in the first 4 games, didn't score any runs. Then they moved him down to the middle order. And that opening middle order thing has been present for the last like 12 months as well. Sometimes he opens, sometimes he's in the middle order. It's very confusing and a bit all over the place. But as much as I want Devon Conway to be the wicketkeeper, he's also a pretty good fielder. But it would be pretty shit. It would be pretty shit to yank Tim Seifert after one game as well. So it's just, I think in summary, it all just comes together. It's a bit messy and it's just a bit like there is that complicated vibe. And yeah, it's a really interesting game Monday morning against India.
I do wonder if there's a comparison there between Tim Seifert, what you're saying about Tim Seifert, and you remember the tail end of Colin Munro's time with the Blackcaps, where he'd been through like a rough bit of form. He was out of the ODI team by this point. He was trying to hang on there in the 2020s, and like what we saw from Colin Munro was him grinding out runs, but they weren't Colin Munro runs. They were runs at like a 110 strike rate, 100 strike rate, rather than Colin Munro being Mr. Boom or Bust. And when he goes boom, he goes extremely boom. Like it wasn't that version of Colin Munro, and I think that was kind of the point in which they gave up at him after that, because he still had the same weaknesses, which is that like you cramp him up a little bit, he was probably going to scoop one up to mid wicket or whatever. So like two parallels there. One is I wonder if Tim Seifert is feeling the pressure of those runs and is trying to like bat within himself a little bit in order to help his average in a form of the game where strike rate is more important than average and sacrificing his strike rate for that average. And then the other one is I wonder, you did mention whether maybe Tim Seifert just has certain flaws that get exposed against the best opposition, because Colin Munro did have that. Perhaps that's another parallel as well. I don't know.
For both of them, it's like the best version of you is 25 runs off 10 balls.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily 50 off, whatever, or 100 off. It's not necessarily big runs. It's like in T20 cricket, Colin Munro, Tim Seifert, you just want to fucking smack it. Like that's kind of all you're there to do because you're good at it, because you've shown over a period of time you are good at that. Just do it. Like don't overcomplicate it. However, it seems as though things are being a bit overcomplicated. Plunket Shield cricket wildcard. That was a massive Blackcaps chat, so we'll just keep this fairly concise. What was the most relevant thing for you in this first round of Plunket Shield? Central Districts versus Canterbury, drawn match, and Wellington defeated Otago. Seam bowlers took a lot of wickets. Some blokes scored runs as well. Like, is there a black cap relevant performance that you were interested in? Was it my thing was kind of the young batsmen. I talked about this in the variety show. Luke Georgeson, Troy Johnson, Bailey Wiggins were all pretty good with the bat. In my written summary, I also highlighted that Jaden Lennox was kind of good for Central Districts as a spin bowler. You had Jaden Lennox for CD, Theo Van Workum for Canterbury, and Michael Rippon as the frontline seam bowlers. And then you had, Cole McConchie, Rachin Ravindra, those type of characters bowling overs as well. Brad Schmullian, shout out to him. He bowled a couple of leggies. So I've kind of, in different ways, I've shared my Plunket Shield thoughts. I'm curious, just what is there a pocket in this Plunket Shield first round that interested you, intrigued you, or that you want to highlight as something fun?
Well, Tom Latham just ghosting in with a sneaky century was one, because I didn't. I mean, that one almost crept up. It was at a point where it like started off batting, like chasing like 450 or something with a day and a half to win. Unlikely to start with, but you chuck Henry Nichols up there to open with him, and we'll just see how it goes. Put the two best batsmen in early, and if they get off to a flyer, we'll come back tomorrow and have some fun. If not, we'll grind this one out. The grinding out is what ended up happening. It's noticed, but Latham sneaking his way to 100 there amidst all that, almost under the radar, was nicely, just nice, efficient Tom Latham work there. And then I see also, I think he got out, he got 100, then he got out reverse sweeping not long after that, which is, that's a black cap in the Plunket Shield if ever there was one. I can get the milestone and then have some fun. I think the most, I don't know, it's thing with this, the start of a new season is always like, it's the players you don't know a lot about who suddenly come into focus that often stands out. And I just think some of the young dudes who Bailey Wiggins is 133 on debut at almost a run a ball was like insane. We talked a bit about some of these guys on our Patreon episode earlier in the week as well, for people who want to have a listen to that. That he came in at a difficult time and just changed the complexion of the game into his team's favor with that innings. Like, it wasn't just a good innings. It certainly wasn't a slide under the radar Tom Latham 100 in a game that ended up being a comfortable draw with rain being affecting. This was a completely flip the momentum kind of inning. So that was crazy. And then I think Nathan Smith getting, 9 for against his old team, which you tweeted something out was like, was that, what was the stat? Like, he took 9 wickets in his first game for Wellington. He took 8 all season last for Otago or something.
Yeah.
Which then someone replied to, pointing out that he didn't actually get to bowl against Otago last time, though, or else he might have been up there. Which, yeah, fair point. Fair point. If he did get to bowl against his Otago teammates, then he might have also done similar things. But I don't know. That's another one of those. And then guys like Georgeson and Johnson getting runs, younger fellas as well chipping in there and really kind of I could say announcing themselves, but I'll be even more optimistic than that and say setting the platform for big seasons if they can carry on from there is the real point. Because one good innings at the start of the summer won't get you into the Blackcaps, but sustained good innings, and at least the selectors brows will be raised at that kind of thing.
Noted T20 batsman Tom Latham, couple of half centuries in Bangladesh. He goes all right at T20 cricket.
I was thinking that when you mentioned about the wicketkeeper stuff, it's like, do we want to make Conway the keeper? I'm thinking, well, where's Tom Latham when you need him? That's right, he's scoring 100 for Canterbury.
Would you feel worse about this Blackcaps team if Tom Latham was opening the batting instead of Martin Guptill?
Yes, I think I would, because I think Guptill offers more than just the runs that he scores as well. For one, he's the best fielder in the team, and for two, I think having a guy I think it's a lot easier to find another opening partner for him if there's the sturdy presence that's always there as well. Having said that, I think if Latham was in the team, I still think he'd be batting lower down the order, sort of like what we see. Maybe a little higher up for these conditions. You chuck him in 3 or 4 or 5. But I mean, his role in the ODI team isn't to open, is it? It's to come in at 5 and be the middle over guy.
You can absorb Guptill's fielding with like Latham's wicketkeeper, then Devon Conway's in the field.
Guptill sub fielder, 12th man, makes up for that, I suppose.
Or just injury reserve and 16th man and whatever.
Yeah.
Shout out to Tom Latham. I love that Canterbury trio. Tom Latham, Henry Nicholls, Matt Henry. Henry took a 5 for. Henry Nicholls.
Yeah, another one that snuck under the radar.
Yeah, Henry Nicholls didn't do too much. He was dismissed by Ray Toole twice. Those you just mentioned snuck under the radar. That is what these three do for Canterbury every single summer. And they play a fair bit for Canterbury because they're not T20 players. So they're always around unless it's Test or ODI cricket, and there's no ODI cricket each summer. So it's kind of like when they're playing Test cricket, they're busy. And then when the Blackcaps are playing one of their 50 T20 internationals in Aotearoa each summer, those lads go back to Canterbury and they help Canterbury. They actually genuinely help Canterbury win games and win competitions. And that's what I love to see. And it started right again this year with a Tom Latham century and Matt Henry wickets. Let's transition over to the football Ferns wildcard, who did that game against Canada. It finished 1-0, the second game. So they started with a 5-1 loss, and then they did put in an improved performance 1-0. They just some observations from the football aficionado around here. They did manage to put a whole lot of pressure on Canada. They wanted a lot of ball in the Canadian half, a lot of turnovers, and then just like there wasn't a whole lot of connection up front. There wasn't a whole lot of combining for passes and creating chances, which doesn't feel like this is stuff that we've kind of discussed for a while about the football Ferns. And they also mentioned in the commentary, like, wow, because you got in the NBA, you got the Chicago Bulls who are 4-0 and they've played some shit teams.
Yeah.
And when they mentioned this in the commentary of the football Ferns, I was like, this is the opposite. The football Ferns have struggled, but they are playing the best teams in the world. They are playing Canada. They are playing USA. They are playing Sweden. And it's like, fuck, like, surely schedule some games against like China or like, you know, just
even China's pretty good, but yeah.
Yeah, just random teams like, but that's
Curacao and Bahrain.
Yeah, exactly. Like get some of those games locked in because that's the flip side is I think the strength of schedule here for the football Ferns is actually quite interesting because I think it's going to be beneficial moving forward with a lot of these players getting the highest level of women's football available to them at this stage of their careers and at this stage as a team. I think is really going to be beneficial moving forward. So that is also to say, like, the football Ferns don't win many games, unlike the Chicago Bulls, but they are in a far different scheduling situation where they are competing against the best teams in the world and are just battling away. They're just grinding away against the best teams. Standout player, again, from the football aficionado, CJ Bott. Holy shit. Like, just ripping in, tackles down that right side, bursting forward, never slowing down. Like, it's kind of Makhachev-ish.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Yeah,
just the two-way impact and the endurance and the motor to be able to sustain that two-way impact over the course of a game and to do it against the gold medal winning team. Like, CJ Butler was well-timed tackles, and then a couple of minutes later, she's bursting forward, working some combinations and getting into the attacking box. So how did you maybe not like that's basically how the second game went, right? Like, it was an improved performance. But it was still like not quite good enough to the win as seen in the 1-0 result. How do you package the two results together as a series to sum up where the football Ferns are at?
Yeah, Yeah, I think it's the parallels that we're looking for, because that's the stuff that, like, the parallels between the two performances, because that's what shows like that shows the stuff that they're actually working on. Like, take out the variables, and like those are the things that the things that those performances will have in common are the things that they're actually like working towards. That is what the plan is for Jekka Kemplover as the Football Ferns coach. The where that gets a bit tricky is that the performance in game one wasn't great, and the performance in game two was miles better. So you're not just looking at the parallels, you're also like, you've got to balance, is this a parallel with that when one was just done way better, or is it done way better because they did something different? But no, I think like in the first game you saw a lot of because it was a 4-3-3 both times, and that is my favorite formation in general, mostly for playing in it, because it's like the worst thing, if you like, because I normally try to play striker in these teams, but I often don't get to because I'm not fast enough or strong enough or whatever. But that when you're not striker, you'll often just get chucked on the wing. If in a 4-4-2, that means you're doing a lot of defending. It's boring. If in a 4-3-3, it means you get to push inside and be just an extra striker. It's fun. So I have a bias towards 4-3-3 anyway. But I think it's the most fluid, most flexible kind of formation anyway in general, and probably the most common one that you see around world football at the moment. So I like that from the Ferns. In the first game, the shape was very muddled. You saw the wide players in the three were doing a lot of defending because Canada's fullbacks were pushing quite far forward, doubling up on their fullbacks, which means that the wingers have to get back and support. And with the midfield three playing quite flat, rather than you often get like the triangle, the sort of upwards facing triangle or the downwards facing triangle. Downwards is, a CDM with two kind of eights. The upwards pointing is the, number 10 with two eights kind of scenario. This was like a flat three mostly, which means that they were pushing a bit back. The wingers were coming back. So it was almost like 4-5-1. The striker was isolated. The wingers weren't able to get forward and help because they're doing too much defending. Second game, in order to fix that, I thought and it was obvious from the first 5 seconds of the game, they were trying to play further up the field. They were trying to bring their defensive line up. They're trying to bring their midfield line up. They're trying to bring their forward line up on top of that. And because you're playing the game higher up in the thing, you're better able to close down passing lanes because you're not just sitting back and defending. Close down passing lanes, and you can hopefully get Canada playing sideways a little bit, get them playing sideways. Maybe you can get them playing just a rough pass every now and then. There's one from early-ish in the game that I highlighted in the written piece about it. Where you've got them defending in a three here, back four doing whatever they want. In the other half, like the midfield's pushing up into across halfway as well as the forward line. And then Canada play not a sloppy pass, but it was a sloppy touch by the midfielder coming back to collect the ball in between those lines. All it takes is one sloppy touch, and Rhea Percival's just coming bang, shooting through the gap, and like in an NFL play where you get someone misses their block and then the linebacker comes surging through on the quarterback. It was like that. Rhea Percival was playing linebacker basically in midfield, but she could just shoot out and won the ball back in the challenge, pushing up. It ended up with like an Olivia Chance shot or something like that. So that kind of thing worked really nicely for them and keeping Canada thread. And they weren't quite at the level where, especially I think because the front three was quite inexperienced. Gabby Rennie starting fifth cap for her, Jackie Hand second cap and both of them first ever start. So some of that comes with the territory. Like they're trying to build towards something. It's part of the process. You sort of accept there'll be mistakes. Definitely with the way in possession they tried to play out of the back, you sort of got to accept there'll be mistakes there. And there'll be times when you turn the ball over badly. But if you can see you're working towards the right thing and then getting better at those combinations, that's, you accept those mistakes because it's part of the learning process. I enjoyed that a lot more, seeing a clear, distinct plan, and just little tweaks like that made things so much better from game one to game two. And I was actually kind of shocked that the performance was that much better. Like I was expecting another slightly disjointed performance because we're seeing a team trying to work on new combinations, not new combinations player to player, but new combinations in terms of the formation that they're playing and what their roles, what those players' individual roles are out there under a new coach. Yeah, and I was like, it's like I'm buzzing about how much better they were in game two, even though it didn't come with a result. And that is the thing to remember, is they did still lose the game. They have gone 14 games without a win now. As you say, mostly playing against teams a lot better than them, so it kind of comes with the territory. But like, obviously they need to win some games. You got to get that confidence up, and I don't think we saw too many answers. Another thing you alluded to, I don't think we saw too many answers to the main question about this team, which is how are they going to score goals? Where's the creativity coming from? But I do think a lot of attacking stuff, if you're not going to rely on just individuals being crazy good, and we don't really have someone in an attacking sense who can do that, just like game breakers, unless you're relying on that kind of thing, the attack does need a platform to build from. And this is that. This is the setting up of the platform. This is saying when we get in trouble in midfield, we're not just going to hoof the ball down the channel and ask a striker to run after it. We'll play back to the centre back. We'll get the centre back spreading wide and the keeper pushing up a little bit. We'll give, we'll have options. We'll try build up in this way, a midfielder dropping in to help out. Quite a few times you'd see Percival dropping in, pass into her feet, and then first time square ball out to the fullback who's pushing up a little bit. You saw that quite a bit. And also I think an underrated factor, because I thought I can see all the hype for CJ Bott, because she was another very good performance there. I think she had quite a few sloppy touches in the first half in particular, which you don't necessarily expect from her, but some of the defensive work, she was flawless. But I would lean towards Rhea Percival there as the player of the day, because I think I think what we saw from her was a lot more like what we see her doing for Spurs, where she is not so much a holding midfielder, but just like a almost box to box. But she's that person who often starts the press for Spurs as well, in the same way I was describing before. So that kind of thing is it's cool to see her used in her best way, because I think she's a potential game changer player for the football Ferns in that way. Someone who can, if you can't build up your attacks too well, we'll try hit them in transition nice and early, turn the ball over high up. This wasn't like a high press I'm talking about necessarily what they were doing, but it was like just pushing the arm wrestle back, making Canada play in their own half a bit more, and then trying to win the ball when the opportunity arose. And all of that stuff, all of that just adds up to a distinct plan. The team knew what they were trying to do, and it's something they can clearly build on. The do or die for Jika Clover as football Ferns coach is going to be, how does she turn that into goals? But yeah, as I say, you need a platform. You need to be able to scoring goals is one of those, like Chris Wood could tell you. The key to scoring lots of goals is to take lots of shots. You don't need to be the person who scores every time they shoot, but only gets one shot a game kind of thing. That's insane levels to keep up with. What you want to be is you look at the Premier League top scorers, guys like Harry Kane and Mo Salah and Cristiano Ronaldo will be in the same thing this season as well. They're not just the top scorers, they're also the guys who take the most shots. They score lots of goals because they shoot lots, and they shoot lots because their teams put them in positions to shoot lots. And they're in positions to shoot lots because they're not just sitting back, soaking up, defending the whole time. They're actually playing in the other half a lot more. And those kind of things, I think, will lead to better attacking opportunities for the Ferns when they play against teams closer to their own level. And hopefully the idea of what that is what defines a team closer to their own level will hopefully, as they get some of these things going, their level will rise, and they can maybe do this against Canada at some point. They were definitely pushing for an equalizer near the end there, just didn't quite have the extras to find a goal, and they never really looked like scoring, to be honest. It was just long shots with the best hope that they had all throughout that game. So as much improved as the defense and midfield were in shape and performance, and just I think the most underrated thing here as well is the mental side of it, believing that you can play, take it to better teams and knock the ball around and don't panic, have that composure on the ball, have players looking to be options, have players knowing where those options are supposed to be because of good coaching and good patterns and things like this. The confidence in that probably comes from a coach saying, look, I trust you. I trust you to do this kind of stuff. You'll make mistakes sometimes, but I'm going to back you when you make mistakes because I know, like I said before, I know you're working towards an end goal here. So all of that in mind, we can't overlook the fact that they did lose another game. I'm trying to play down results throughout this tour, but they did still lose 2 games, but yeah, miles better in the second game, and miles better in a way where you can see the prospect for progress. The thing that makes sense what I'm saying, like you can see the trajectory that they're on, that they're trying to be on. And that's the most important thing we could have got out of this tour. So, and we did, and we get in game 2 with a much better performance, much better structure, shape, intention, all those things, confidence. That's what we need to see from the Ferns, and it is, and it's quite a, you know, exciting times, I think, for what that team could be, supposing they can get lots more games together and play regularly and continue to actually build these things.
Which of the young players / debutantes stood out for you?
I think well, a couple of them didn't play. I think there were 3 players in the squad who were potential debutants who didn't get on the field. Did get 3 debutants in the first game, mostly in smaller roles, with the exception of the 2 who got promoted to start the second game, Rennie and Hand. I like Gabby Rennie's been spoken of before because she played at the Olympics. So I think Jackie Hand probably has to be the almost default answer to that one, where I think you could see from her performances, and by all accounts, she was backing it up on the training field as well throughout the week. Like you could see that she is a year or 2 older than a lot of the other college players that were being called up, and a year or 2 more just advanced in her development, little smarter in a few areas and things. And she's definitely a player who, from what she had done at a college level, I think, you know, she wouldn't have got into the squad if it hadn't been a lesser squad, like a half year, all your Australian-based players missing. She wouldn't have got in the squad in that situation. However, a couple injuries, and maybe she's someone who might have been on the fringes at that point, because she has had a good college career to this point. And I think this tour has done her absolute, like, she's probably boosted her stocks more than anyone else over the course of this tour, from where they were beforehand to where they are now. And I think she might be someone who is on the outer fringes of a first choice football Ferns squad. I mean, it's touch or go, depends on what you want, what the coach, like what kind of players the coach is looking to pick. But I think she's someone, definitely considering Jackie Ann is still relatively young, like very young player, you know, early 20s, who will continue to develop a fair bit and get a lot better, you'd hope. I think that's, she's definitely someone who's had a good tour, and someone who has, like, you know, put forward their case for the trajectory that she's on personally as a player as well. I definitely reckon that.
We recently had a victory for Hemi Ahio.
Yeah, we did.
Was that in the UAE as well?
Yeah, I think it was.
So now we have City Kickboxing teammate, comrade, stablemate, Dan Hooker, chasing another victory for City Kickboxing this weekend against Islam Makhachev. And the beauty about MMA is, like, you've got that styles make fights old adage thing, which is, you know, it stems from boxing, and it's from different stylistic matchups in boxing. But I think it's so much easier to understand and comprehend in an MMA format, where it's not necessarily, like, it's just you're not getting into the minutia about boxing. You're just like, okay, we've got a wide range of mixed martial arts to draw upon. Where do you draw the bulk of your style from? And this matchup between Dan Hooker and Islam Makhachev is fascinating, because you've got Islam Makhachev from the Khabib Nurmagomedov stable. Like, he literally grew up with Khabib. He is whether it's like by Khabib himself or from other people, he's been labeled the next Khabib. And Khabib did his thing in the UFC, retired, and he's now coaching his team, Islam Makhachev. So he has kind of just like flipped it around and been like, now it's my turn to coach these dudes that are part of my team and part of my squad. And that tells you all you need to know about Makhachev. He is from the Dagestani Sambo wrestling type of style. He is like these Dagestani dudes are just like Dan Hooker's neck level. Like, let's not forget, like these Kiwis are pretty ruthless and happy to have a scrap, but it's like a different breed in some of these other countries, especially Dagestan. So you've got Dan Hooker from the City Kickboxing stable. He's predominantly striking, world-class striking, ranger striking, and there for a scrap. And then you've got Islam Makhachev, who has come into the UFC and displayed many of the same traits that Khabib is showing, and has worked his way up the lightweight division to the point where not many people want to fight Islam Makhachev. Like, he's struggling to get fights against higher ranked opponents. And now he's fighting Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker took up this fight a couple of weeks ago and said, yeah, let's do it. So you've got a stylistic matchup between someone who's predominantly a striker up against someone who's predominantly a grappler. However, the fun wrinkle that has been added over the last few months is that we've seen greater grappling from the City Kickboxing fighters. Dan Hooker showed this himself against Nasrat Haqparast in their last fight. He took him down a few times and controlled the fight on the mat. We've seen even Israel Adesanya's like had some grappling moments, and there's been this narrative around the MMA world of like people just assumed that City Kickboxing dudes couldn't wrestle. So the minute they show some sort of wrestling, it's like, oh my God, like he's added this to his game. Where like when, like what we know about City Kickboxing is they have a boxing department. They have an MMA department. And within that MMA department, they have jiu-jitsu. They have wrestling. They have striking. Like it's all there. And they like it's kind of, to assume that City Kickboxing fighters don't have any wrestling is to ignore the fact that they are extremely well-rounded fighters, and they've shown that a few times. That's the background around this fight. Now, I don't necessarily think that Dan Hooker is going to try and wrestle Islam Makhachev, because I don't know how that's going to work out. But that's the background around the stylistic matchup. And it's I've been thinking about this because like Islam Makhachev hasn't fought too many top-ranked opponents, but he is like the boogeyman of the division in the sense that everyone knows he's coming. Everyone knows he's there. And he had a fight earlier this year against Drew Dober that he won. And Brad Riddell just fought Drew Dober in his last fight this year as well. So that kind of shows where Islam Makhachev is in the UFC. His public profile is far bigger because he's the heir to the Khabib throne. He's like thrown up as the boogeyman. But one of his recent fights was against the dude who Brad Riddell just fought, and Brad Riddell is just entering. He's in like his second or third year of the UFC. Where you've got Dan Hooker, he is fighting at the top of the division, and he is a gatekeeper of the division at this stage. And his losses have come against Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler, dudes who are competing for titles in this division. So it's a weird matchup in the sense that you've got someone who has a massive profile around the world in Islam Makhachev, but he hasn't actually had a test against one of the best fighters in the division. And you've got Dan Hooker, who lives at the top of this division, trying to face the dude who many believe is the next great lightweight fighter. Chuck in the stylistic matchup of striker versus grappler with some brewing grappling prowess out of City Kickboxing. And it's one of those MMA fights where it's just like, wow, this is going to be fun. It also might be one of those MMA fights where Dan Hooker just gets taken down and absolutely smashed to pieces. And those fights aren't so fun to watch. Like, I remember City Kickboxing's Gina Fabian, she fought Kayla Harrison earlier this year, and Kayla Harris, it's the same matchup. Like, you got a grappler, prowess, Kayla Harrison, striker, kickboxer, and Gina Fabian. You get taken down, you get put on the mat, and then you just get punched. And it's like, well, how fun is that to watch for a Kiwi type of stuff? And that this has that potential for Dan Hooker. So, but then again, Dan Hooker is riding this wave of not only skill execution and fight, prowess, like he's fighting at the top of the division, but now he's got this momentum of being a UFC fan favorite as well for his willingness to fight and his willingness to get in there against the best in the division. And all that's going to be happening on Sunday. It's a massive card for the UFC. It is in the UAE. But for Dan Hooker, this is a really interesting challenge against someone who many in the UFC MMA world think is the best like grappler in the whole UFC roster.
Yeah, that's kind of nuts then, the context of that whole thing, because you get I don't know how widely is it therefore being like publicized, because obviously if you're fighting against a big name title fight or whatever, any UFC card like that is going to get a fair bit of focus, but sort of fighting the up and comer guy, often those kind of fights and those kind of sporting contests in general tend towards the sort of you got to be a little bit deeper in to kind of catch the content, because I think most people, even just like Kiwi Dan Hooker fans, perhaps might have missed some of what you were just saying there had you not just said that, if you know what I mean. Like, is this the kind of fight that is getting relatively widespread attention? The one thing about the UFC that's quite good is that they can the old centralized governing body means you do get to like spread things out a bit, so it's not going to be competing with other major cards or whatever necessarily. But like, is this something that like I don't know, bloody Joe Rogan or someone's going to be tweeting heavy about or whatever?
It's a strange measurement of
it's not a good one, but it's the first name I could think of that people beyond UFC, like first UFC guy who I think beyond UFC would gather the, I don't know, listen, I don't know.
It is on this, the headline fights are 2 title fights. So Jan Blachowicz is defending his belt, and he is the dude who fought Israel Adesanya earlier this year in the light heavyweight division. And there's another fight in a lighter division between Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen for an interim belt. And then you've got Hooker versus Makhachev in the, is there a word for like the third penultimate, like the second to last fight of the night, but it's the third to last fight of the night? Is there a word? The
bronze medal match? I don't know.
Is there a word for that, like penultimate?
But it'll get the spotlight then, as you're saying, because it's a big card overall.
What you're talking about stems from the recent wave that Dan Hooker's on. So, like, you do have the Islam Makhachev factor where he is like a bit better than an up and coming fighter, because the thing that stopped him from getting further is that he's kind of too good, because everyone's kind of scared of him as well. So, like, if you're trying to move up the rankings, you don't want to be too good to where those other fighters don't want to fight you, because they want to hold on to their ranking position or their upper echelon position. So you kind of want to be a promising fighter, but with weaknesses that someone thinks they can expose. See, that's all the Makhachev stuff. Like, Makhachev stuff is interesting itself. He brings a big fan base of like Khabib's fans and just like people interested in what he's doing. But now you've got this Dan Hooker factor, where Dan Hooker isn't just another UFC fighter, that was kind of his vibe a couple years ago, well, just prior to the pandemic even. And then, like, starting 2020, he had the war against Paul Felder. Then he had some more big fights, and his recent antics in a positive way. Now he is a certified UFC fan favorite. And what he's done over the last month has solidified that. So that's only adding to the buzz. Like everyone knows you're going to get a scrap when Dan Hooker's fighting. Everyone knows that something is going to happen. Even if he is getting smashed, he is there for it. You know, he's not going to, holy shit, this dude's taking me down. I'm going to run away. I'm going to run around the octagon and try and avoid it. Dan Hooker is there to scrap and see who is the better fighter. And that is very endearing to UFC fans. So I think there is plenty of buzz around this fight just because of who Dan Hooker has become. And it's only a recent development. Like UFC fans and the UFC has bought into Dan Hooker because when all this stuff around like city kickboxing fighters wanting to move overseas, Dan Hooker accepted this fight and the UFC has upped their support for Dan Hooker. So like we hear all the stuff about UFC fighter pay and it's a bit of a murky situation, but it is what it is. Same with the ICC, like for all their weird shit, it is what it is. And we just deal with the boundaries and context we're given. UFC does have this fighter pay thing, but for someone like Dan Hooker, he takes this fight and then the UFC supports him in being based in Las Vegas. So he has access to the Performance Institute where if you're a UFC fighter, you've got access to the gym, world-class state-of-the-art facility, recovery, weights, octagons, kitchen. You can, free feeds all day. And then he's also got other gyms. I think he's talked about being with Syndicate MMA. And so he's been able to do the wrestling practice required for this fight at a gym where they have a bit more of a wrestling background and they've got fighters who are proficient in wrestling to just go spar with round and round and round and do it again. So there is because Dan Hooker kind of did the UFC a solid here in taking this fight straight after his last fight on kind of short notice, the UFC has returned the favor. So that, whether it's the fan favoritism and him being endearing to UFC fans, because like fight fans just want to see it scrap. Like, let's be honest, there's like, even in boxing, you just want to see the sweet science at its finest. And Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, people love it because they want to see it scrap, even though it is, a bit more polished than boxing. But that's the fans' perspective of Dan Hooker, is he is there for a scrap, no bullshit. He is just there to fight. But now there's this other bit where the UFC is really supportive of Dan Hooker because of his willingness. Like the UFC loves Dan Hooker's willingness to fight, and the fact that he is taking fights, and the fact that he will do anything to fight, the fact that he will go through endless bullcaca just with the way the world is right now in New Zealand is to fight. So I think like the UFC is even like flying his wife and his child to be like get into the USA and to be based there. So there is that support from the UFC, as well as support from the fans around the world, not just Kiwi fans. Then you've got the whole Islam Makhachev side and the Khabib side. And it's all coming together on a Sunday afternoon in Aotearoa, and it's going to be fucking fantastic. But I really don't like watching people get smashed in the UFC. No. So it's like I'm excited, and I've got a bit of a fizz on. Like it's a pretty shitty situation here in Aotearoa at the moment. Everyone's getting a bit insane. So when you've got stuff like this to look forward to on a Sunday afternoon, it's really fun. But the flip side of that is there is a high chance, like decent probability, that Islam Makhachev takes Dan Hooker down, and we are just watching Dan Hooker get smashed for a couple of rounds. There's also a fun chance that Dan Hooker makes this a really interesting fight. Like what you see in the background here of the YouTube video is Dan Hooker kneeing Ross Pearson in the face. So Dan Hooker has these tools. Like imagine you're putting your head down to like rugby tackle someone. Well, you might get a knee in the face. Like that's Dan Hooker. And he has these tools to be able to nullify what Islam Makhachev can do, let alone this idea, this narrative, this wrinkle of city kickboxing actually having decent wrestling and grappling. Shout out to Andre Paulette, who is the city kickboxing wrestling coach in Aotearoa in Auckland at City Kickboxing. And then the City Kickboxing team have also worked extensively with the Hickman brothers. And Frank Hickman will be in his corner. He's based in America right now. So they have like plenty of they put a lot of effort and resource into their grappling, into their jiu-jitsu. Like they have got jiu-jitsu practitioners there. They got a whole wrestling department to go with their boxing department and everything else. So that's kind of what Dan Hook is dealing with.
So that's on Sunday afternoon, you said, and then at 3 a.m. on Monday morning is the Blackcaps versus India, isn't it? So don't know how to pass the time, but that might be the sleep time is after Dan Hooker's fight, and then up until the Blackcaps, that might be the brief moment of sleep that's available. But that's a busy Sunday.
Well, it's a bit of a bummer because the UFC fight is in Abu Dhabi. So the Blackcaps will be playing in Dubai.
Right, so they won't quite be able to catch up with each other.
Yeah, so they'll be, well, I don't know how far away Dubai is from Abu Dhabi. Like maybe grab the win, hop in a private jet, you know.
Yeah, jump on the bus or something, get on the bullet train, and then they'll be like panning the crowd after Martin Guptill or whoever smacks a six into it, and then Dan Hooker will just be there with one of the New Zealand flags, or an A4 paper sign with a vivid pen writing "Go Blackcaps" or something like that. You know how they do. Cricket fans are pretty what's the word, like low stakes when it comes to some of their signage sometimes.
Well, we did see the Let's Gone.
Yes, there was one, wasn't there? And everyone outside of New Zealand had no idea what it meant.
Or Dan Hooker doesn't give a fuck about cricket.
Well,
like that's also a possibility because everyone's vocal about the MIQ situation, but some sports don't benefit from the same support that other sports get. So it'll be like Dan Hooker, like for all the Aotearoa sporting funk available here, Dan Hooker also might not give a fuck. So,
or he might have an active vendetta, like
or he could go a step further.
Rooms booked for them, and he does not. So,
and then you see
he'll be there with the Indian flag or something.
Instead of the you go to an event and they cut to a fighter in the crowd and they do the you just see
and the little thing at the bottom that'll highlight them, which is how you know that they were this isn't an accident that they just happened to find this person in the crowd. They were planted there, and the cameras knows.
Blackcaps versus India, they cut to Dan Hooker in the crowd, and he's like turning the light bulb. You know, he's doing some bangara or whatever. He's like, fuck the Blackcaps.
He's got the drums out or something.
Yeah, it's just like now, Indian MMA for life.
I really hope we see that. I really hope we can find that bullet train to catch up with the Blackcaps.
I don't want to see it because of what it means. Like, it won't be cool, but it would be cool to see Dan Hooker surrounded by Indians turning the light bulb. That would be fun. But then I'd think about it and I'd be like, this is kind of sad.
Fun, but sad, yeah. I don't know.
That would be hilarious, but it would also be a bit... Right, yeah. Let's finish there.
Yeah.
Pick it up, Aotearoa. Pick it up, Aotearoa Sport. Anyone doing Kiwi sporting things this weekend, big it up to you. Big it up to everyone in Aotearoa. Stay beautiful. Mauri ora. Raise your mana. Send positive vibrations to the next man dem. Church.